So I wanted to start by just, I didn't do a proper introduction last time. I'm Greg Thompson from BYU. And just to say a little bit more about how we're connected. I first attended one of these maybe 2014. I think I may have been to a couple, 2014, 2015, when we were just trying to get our program started. And I was connected with Mike Cole as a postdoc at UCSD 2010 to 12. And so I've kind of been mucking around in this kind of stuff and trying to understand it. I also just wanted to make clear, we actually don't receive funding from UC Links. We're here because of the community that you guys create here. And so we're kind of here, we always feel like we're here as guests to observe and to learn about how to do this work. And we really appreciate it. And Katie came 2 years ago, maybe, 1 year or last year for the first time. And 2 years ago and last year. And I was just so enthusiastic and excited about it. And I should also mention, she really runs our program at BYU. And we're just trying to figure things out. So that means I don't have a lot to offer in terms of, we don't have a whole lot to offer in terms of what our program does and insights into that. So I'm going to draw on some other work that I've done as possibly a resource to think about the work that you all are doing. And this really sits at the intersection of, I think we can kind of think about two kind of intersections that we have to deal with academia and academics. One is the one that the faculty members have to deal with, which is a very real problem. And I think it's something that somebody needs to spend some time figuring out, because these institutions, the universities that we're in, are not well suited. As I'm watching this video, and I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, think about all of the logistical work that goes into that. As I was talking to Amy yesterday about, she's going to India and Africa and all these different places, doing all this different stuff. And when it comes to your tenure file, these things are oftentimes sort of like, oh, a little service item or something like that. But they're incredibly tiresome and make it very difficult for you to do the other stuff, that the publication stuff that is the thing that they evaluate you on. So institutionally, I think we have a problem there when it comes to the interface of academics and the work that's being done. There's another problem with this interface, which is at the kids level, right? The question is, what do we do about schooling with the kids? And I think there's all kinds of different answers, and I don't think there's any one that we have to deal with. What I'm going to present here is one way of thinking about how do you deal with that particular interface when it comes to language. And academic language is the thing that I'm going to be talking about. But I think this is definitely part of a much bigger kind of question of where does UC Links, what is the relationship between UC Links and schools? What should it be? And I'm perfectly happy with every answer you can give to that it should be subversive in relation to schools. I don't know that anybody quite takes that position, but I know I heard Carla mentioned it yesterday, that yeah, there's some things about this that I just want to say, screw that, let's do something different over here, you know. I'm totally down with that. So the problem of academic language is a construct that's been introduced. It's been around. I trace it back personally. I think this lineage can be traced back to old notions Bernstein had of elaborated versus restricted codes. And all of this sort of captures sort of a deficit sense of language learners, of bilinguals. And this is a way in which this is can be really problematic. And you have to understand your kids are saturated in this, the importance of academic language, this high register that sits up on a pedestal in the ivory towers of academia where we work, right? So the question is, how can we help students to engage with this in a way that will help them potentially to develop this? This is where, again, I'm okay for the subversive critique, but this is a very pragmatic take on it. And I recently was able to be co-editor of this special issue of Theory into Practice, which is very practitioner-oriented. and has some really wonderful pieces in it that help with practical engagement. Yeah. What's that? 5 minutes? Oh, yeah, I have a timer here too. That have really wonderful ideas for practical engagement. Now, it is mostly classroom focused, but I'm going to suggest that there's ways that we could take this into links type settings. So let me just mention one that I'm not going to deal with today. That's an absolutely fantastic piece. It's got the most hits on the journal's website. It's got 2,000 views, over 2,000 views already. Is April Baker Bell's. I'm going to focus on a few others, but it's a really wonderful article, and there's all the articles here are nice. I'll just be focusing on two, one from Nelson Flores and one from Ramon Martinez, and to introduce these concepts of language architects and language mapping, and then last, kind of to tack on what you'll see through those, you'll be getting the idea of critical language awareness, but just to Sami Alim's work on critical language awareness is really quite helpful. So Flores's article, I've just got the reference for it at the top there. And what he's arguing is that academic language is not a list of empirical linguistic practices, but rather a ratio-linguistic ideology that frames the home language practices of racialized communities as inherently deficient. So Flores's argument is this thing of academic language that's floating around, that's in these kids' heads because they're in schools and they're getting it there, has this deficit model of the language that they speak. Martinez has the same critique as well. He notes that he's proposing, Flores is proposing this alternative approach to thinking about language is let's think about our kids as language architects. Let's start to see what are the things that they're doing. Both Flores and Martinez have very, very similar takes on this. And he notes that the framework of language architecture sends a powerful message that their home language practices are integral to the development of their academic identities rather than simply a bridge at best or a barrier at worst. So this is kind of pushing farther in what is it you get with the language that you bring? What are the resources there beyond just being a bridge to getting to academic language? Maybe academic language is already in there. I'm working on a paper with Katie that is making that case for some data that we have. So when you see things as a matter of architecture, there's constraints when you're thinking about architecture, right? You can't just build anything, it'll fall down. But at the same time, there's a great deal of flexibility, and that's what Flores is really pushing. And it's important to note, as I had on a previous slide, that Common Core state standards are really sort of driving things here. This is also what kids have to deal with and their teachers have to deal with, is there are these standards out there that say that you have to have mastery over academic language. And he's making the case that they're already getting this, they're already doing this. And Martinez has a very similar argument that in his article, Looking Closely and Listening Carefully. And here's an example of a state standard that teachers and students will be dealing with. And his response is this idea of language mapping. It goes back a little bit to what I was talking about yesterday with ethnography, but here you have the kids doing the ethnography. You kids doing auto-ethnographies of their own language practices. What are the language practices that kids engage with on a daily basis? What are the things they're doing? And his idea is to show that to teachers, have teachers work with students to do that. But you could just as easily do this with buddies, with mentors who are helping students understand the complexity of their language practices, right? When are you moving between languages? How do you use language? What do you know about the nuances of meaning? Nelson has some great examples of second grader classrooms where kids are doing this incredible work of thinking through all this. And last but not least, then, critical language awareness. This is all wrapped in sort of critical language awareness to help kids understand the first point there. Language is not simply an inert medium of communication, but it's shot through with power relations. We start to get there, then you start to realize, like, oh, there's a reason why academic language is what it is, right? It didn't just come out of nowhere as this ideal form for people to speak to one another. It's got a history, and it's got all kinds of power relations caught up with it. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.